How is everybody doing? Welcome back to another episode of The Banker Next Door. I am your host, Dr. Joe Berquist. Today, I wanted to take a look at the Chinese real estate market. I wanted to just kind of pop in and take a review, see what's going on. And I really wanted to examine how is their property market affecting their banks right now. And I've got three articles here, which was an analysis by S&P Global Market Intelligence, where over the course of a couple of days, it did kind of a series of articles called the Chinese Property Report, and basically just taking a look in on, okay, what's been happening there. So I had reported in an earlier episode that we had seen, basically 40 Chinese banks just disappear overnight. Just amazing. Just 40 Chinese banks disappear, and that how another 3,800 Chinese banks were in trouble. We saw obviously the implosion of the giant Chinese, I think it was Evergrande, huge Chinese real estate company that basically imploded. Had the government had to come in and bail them out. So let's take a look in on kind of just what's going on here with this. So Chinese banks' exposure to the real estate sector is expected to decline further on top of already sharp falls in recent years. Like, lenders have shifted their focus away from real estate amid ongoing challenges to the property market, even as government and financial authorities move to encourage lending to the sector. Aggregate real estate exposure as a percentage of total loans declined 25.9% in 2023 from 32.3% in 2020, according to S&P Global Market Intelligence data. The aggregate value of loans, meanwhile, has virtually flatlined since 2021, an indication that the once booming industry has turned tepid. The exposure of percentage of total loans is likely to continue to fall. Min Tang, Asian Pacific Director of Financial Institution Ratings at S&P Global Ratings, said in an email. Ratings expects property development loan growth to pick up to 3% for 1.5 in 2023, and then to rise to 5% in 2026. It is still, however, expected to lag overall system loan growth of 9% on average over this period. This means lenders will likely look to other sectors of the economy to pick up the slack and make up for potential lost revenue. Growth of the world's second biggest economy slowed in the second quarter. China's GDP expanded 4.7% year over year in late April to June quarter, compared with 5.3% year over year in the first 3 months of 2024, mainly as the drag from the real estate sector hurt construction and household consumption, according to the National Bureau of Statistics of China. The manufacturing sector performed well in the second quarter, helped by a recovery in exports, which fed into the GDP expansion. So I want to give everybody a little bit of context here to some of these numbers. First of all, the numbers that come out of China, and as far as I'm concerned, are highly suspect, and they will always be highly suspect because they are heavily controlled by the Chinese government and what is allowed to come out from the Chinese government. And furthermore, we've had some very questionable financial results from a number of Chinese companies over the years, and they don't have generally accepted accounting principles over there. They don't have the kind of regulation that we have in place on companies here in the U.S. It's much easier for them to kind of manipulate numbers. I mean, they give us these numbers and we have to kind of accept them as they are, if you will. So I just put that little caveat out there. The other thing is that China is having a major demographic issue right now. They had their one-child policy, which is now basically putting them into a kind of a demographic doom loop, if you will. I mean, the population is aging and the number of births and everything is declining, and so they've really kind of put themselves into a big demographic crunch. And now the government and Xi Jinping have tried to kind of reverse the one-child policy. They're trying to encourage people to have more kids, but that is easier said than done. Some tax incentives or whatever are not going to get that done because they have, it's become a cultural thing. They've ingrained this policy into people, into families and individuals for generations now, and that is not that is not easily undone, especially in a country where, people are used to obeying or else. So I think there's a lot of issues there with that are also going to kind of play into China's economy over time. And while those things may or may not play directly into this right now, it's just some things I wanted to point out in terms of kind of like what's going on. In other words, it's not all peaches and cream over there in China right now. They've got some big issues that they're dealing with. And the other thing I would say is, you know, if here in the US, if we had GDP of 5.3% or if we had GDP of 4.7%, that would be a great thing. It would be a great number. But for China to have a GDP of 4.7%, that stinks. That stinks because I mean they had their GDP numbers were 9%, 12%. Yeah, they had some major growth, and so for them to be down to basically this 4.7% range is not a good thing. And you shouldn't take that as like a good number. So here we got kind of a Chinese banks aggregate real estate loan exposure. Has kind of been the aggregate real estate loans are continuing to go up, but are starting to kind of plateau a little bit. But the aggregate real estate loans to total loans are starting to go down a little bit, but still very very high. So here it says Industrial and Commercial Bank of China, the Bank of China, and China Construction Bank Corp, three of what are collectively known as the country's big four banks, were among the 10 China headquartered lenders with the highest real estate exposure as of year end 2023, according to market intelligence. That ranged from 31.42% for Bank of China to 27.99% for ICBC. So just so people understand that the China's big four banks are the biggest banks in the world. They have balance sheets bigger than JP Morgan Chase. All four of them do. All four of them have balance sheets bigger than JP Morgan Chase. These banks are massive banks. And it says here, Hankou Bank Company had the highest exposure of property to the property sector, accounting for 32.42% of its loan book here. So top 10 Chinese banks with the largest real estate loan exposure. Hankou Bank, Postal Savings Bank of China, China Construction Bank Corp, Shanghai Rural Commercial Bank, Bank of East China, Bank of Dalian Company, Fubon Bank, HSBC Bank, and Industrial and Commercial Bank of China. And then it says, talk about, government support. Chinese authorities have announced several measures to support the property sector, including disclosing a whitelist of development projects to which banks were encouraged to lend. Additionally, the People's Bank of China in May cut down payment requirements for first-time home buyers by 5 percentage points to 15% and removed a lower limit on mortgage rates. On July 22nd, the PBOC announced a series of interest rate cuts. According to separate statements on the central bank's websites, the one-year loan prime rate, a benchmark for corporate lending, was lowered by 0.1 percentage points to 3.35%, while the five-year rate, which influences mortgage pricing, was reduced by the same margin to a record low of 3.85%. The central bank also cut the seven-day reverse repurchase agreement rate to 1.7% for 1.8%. The moves were to strengthen counter-cyclical adjustments to better support the real economy. And here it is. The mix of policy actions suggested the PBOC was faced with a dilemma. Norma analyst said it needs to stimulate a sluggish economy that is suffering from the housing crisis, but also needs to fulfill its mandate of a powerful currency and project an image of robust long-term fundamentals. And there you kind of have it right there. Like, so this is a major problem in China, and the fact that they are doing all these things, they're bringing rates down to historical lows. They are, they've made this white list of development projects. In other words, the authorities are telling the banks, here's the list of projects that you are going to lend money to. So make it happen. And then, they're cutting down, payment requirements for first-time home buyers by 5 percentage points. It's just like they're doing all these things to try to get people to buy real estate. But what are the banks doing? The banks are trying to reduce their exposure to real estate. They're trying to not make real estate loans at the moment. So, Okay, we'll continue on here. So the next thing is, weak commercial real estate demand, a risk for banks. Chinese banks' substantial exposure to commercial real estate poses a risk to lenders if demand does not pick up. So at 8.87 trillion yuan in 2023, loans for office buildings, shopping malls, and logistics facilities made up 5.2% of lenders' aggregate loan book, according to S&P Global Market Intelligence data. Loans to the sector amounted to 7.29 trillion yuan in 2019, when it accounted for 6.6% of total loans. Over the same period, banks' total exposure to real estate sector, including residential and commercial, declined to 29.5 from 32.3. And I just want to the GDP slowdown was broadly based, with service sectors slowing significantly. The collateral damage from the sustained housing crisis appears to have impacted a broader range of sectors, especially those related to construction and consumption. And then once again, kind of showing the trend there of going down, them trying to move away. And then let's get to the final article here, which is basically China property report. Cautious mega banks pivot amid real estate struggles. So China's biggest banks, which includes the world's 4 largest lenders by assets, look set to further cut their exposures to the real estate sector as the country's property market challenges persist. So the aggregate exposure to real estate sector of the 5 China-based global systemically important banks, or the GSIBs, fell to 28.73% of total loans in 2023 from 36.6% in 2020. Comparatively, the aggregate real estate exposure of China's banking sector declined. Again, we talked about that already. The country's biggest banks have shifted their lending to other sectors, largely due to the risks associated with the current challenges facing the property sector. Chinese banks reported lower exposures to both home mortgages and property developer loans. The trend is expected to continue. We expect mortgage loan shares of banks are likely to decline in 2024 at a slower pace, while developer loan shares are likely to remain stable due to the government's supportive stance toward quality developer financing. This is just kind of looking beyond NPL ratios. So there you kind of have it right there. So basically, important things to look at here. I want people to keep something in context here. China has entire towns, almost like small cities that they have built where there's nobody there. There's nobody living there. They've built these massive highways, like these 10 lane, 5 lanes in each direction, these massive highways that go out literally hundreds of miles, deep into the center, the heart of China, deep into what you would consider a real estate market, tertiary, communities, communities out there in kind of the middle of nowhere. And they've got these roads that go out there, and there's nobody driving on the roads. And you get out to these cities, they've got giant malls, and they got apartment complexes and office buildings, and because of this just insane overdevelopment and overbuilding in their construction industries, and it's all kind of falling back in on them at this point. And you could see this massive real estate bubble. Probably, I still contend that they have the largest real estate bubble that the world has ever seen there in China. And it gets back to what I said at the beginning about the numbers. Are they being honest and forthcoming with the actual numbers that are coming out? Do we really understand how serious the property market, or the trouble in the property market in China really is? And I think that is a big question mark in my mind. Now, why is all of this important? It's important because China and Japan, and I'll talk about that in a second. China and Japan are the 2 largest purchasers of the U.S. national debt. And if those 2 players, who have dramatically curtailed their purchases of our debt, that's one of the reasons why Janet Yellen has had to focus so much on short-term treasuries and basically bleeding the cash from the treasury accounts dry, because China and Japan are kind of off the board at the moment. China is putting more emphasis on their union with the BRICS nations. Japan, I reported, and what we saw, the market meltdown in Japan. that just happened a couple weeks ago is a big problem. So we have to keep an eye on, and China's got the second largest economy in the world, just behind us, behind the US. So we have to keep an eye on what's going on there. We have to pay attention to what's happening there, because our two economies are so intertwined and interlinked at this point. And then obviously you've got the geopolitical tensions with Taiwan. So we got to keep an eye on what's going on there, just to see what's happening. So, and keep an eye on, like, my next episode that I'm putting out is basically looking at the mega banks in Japan and China and kind of what they're currently doing at the moment. It's kind of like these two episodes are going to kind of go together. So if you thought this was interesting and you want to kind of get a little bit more information on now the kind of the Japanese side, as well as the continuation of what's going on with China, check out that episode as well. But I will wrap up with this. If you like this episode, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe, as that always helps the channel. Please remember, we are on YouTube, Rumble, and all major podcast platforms. Please make sure to leave your comments down below, and I will be back to see everybody again real soon. Thanks a lot.